And I haven't really received the training from Kathy Baumgartner, but I've done something similar to this for the last 3 years in science, because I think some of the science worksheets are, they've moved towards better questions, but some of the questions are not where I think I would want them. And I find that there's a lot of questions, but they usually lack substance, where if we could cut it down to less questions that had more substance, that the students would get a lot more from it. So I just took a section review, and this was actually multiple pages. This is just the first one. And this took me about 10 minutes 2 days ago to do. So it really does not take that long, and these are so useful that it cuts down a lot of time. And the first question was, in your own words, write a definition for the following terms. And I find that this is, it's too easy for them. They can do this really without thinking too much about it. Even when it says in your own words, they'll look in their book and they might change one word. So I really don't know that they get anything out of an activity where they're just supposed to write a definition down. So what I did was I went to these cards. Could you bring up the other one? And then I just started looking through, well, how could I make that better? And when I got to 2, organizing, and number 4, analyzing, I thought, well, there's something else I could do with this. What if they had to create a diagram that had those terms on it, and that diagram had to show the relationship between those terms, and they could also put the definition right on there. So it's not that they're not going to do that activity that was in that question. They can still define it, but it's going to be part of this bigger thing. And so I took that first one, and instead of just writing down the definitions for words, what I came up with would create a diagram, and that was straight from one of these, either 2 or 4, if you have them there. I just went through, and there was one that had create a diagram. I thought, yeah, that would be, make a diagram, chart, graphic, organizer. That was part of organizing. So to create a diagram that shows condensation, clouds, and precipitation. The diagram should show their relationship. I don't want just kind of words with arrows. I want them to see that they understand that condensation is happening in the sky, the clouds forming, and eventually, if there's enough condensation, it could lead to precipitation. That there is a link between these 3 words. So to make a diagram that shows their relationship, and then they can include a brief description of each word, just so that I do know that they understand the definition. And so that is what I came up with for the first one. And then just for my own, because I wanted to kind of keep track of what level I was having them think at, I put 2 and 4 just to kind of remind myself of where I had found those in the future. So that is what I did with the first question, because I just thought they would have to work harder. And also later on, when they had to do some other things with these questions, I just cut those questions out completely, because they'd already really thought about it and done the hard work here, that they didn't have to do some of the other fill in the blank or write a definition word. And then number 2, which of the following clouds is most likely to produce light to heavy continuous rain? Well, that is very easy. They can go in their book. There's cloud types. So I didn't really like that question, but we had talked a lot about, we walked outside, we were going to this class, and I had walked outside, we looked at the clouds and talked about what that meant. So what I thought was, this is a good prediction question, and I went to number 5. It says, predict what might happen. That was fine. So instead of saying what type of cloud is going to produce light to heavy rain, I think I flipped them around, but said you notice nimbostratus clouds to the west, that's the general direction our weather would come from, anticipate the outcome. So not go to your book, figure out which cloud produces what, but if you see this, what does that mean? And then they have to go through that mental process of saying, okay, what type of cloud is going to produce that type of rain? I mean, so they're still going to be answering that same question, but it's just, instead of a multiple choice where they can go straight to the book, now they really have to understand that a certain nimbo means rain. Now I'm going to teach you science, but the prefix nimbo means rain, so they're going to have to know that. They're going to have to know that there's a difference between nimbostratus and cumulonimbus. And they'll have to understand all of that to really create this answer. So I like that question better than their multiple choice question. How is relative humidity affected by the amount of water vapor in the air, and what does a relative humidity of 75% mean? I didn't really, those questions were okay. But instead of that, I combined them, and I made a question, predict what might happen as relative humidity nears 100. Really similar to what I did with number 5. They're just going to have to predict. They have to understand, as humidity is rising, what does that mean? What is the outcome of higher humidity? And as you get near 100% and it becomes more humid and it eventually rains, it's not that it's difficult, but they're going to have to understand those connections. And it really covered both those, so instead of 2 questions, it was 1, and I felt that that captured the gist of it. And then describe the path of water through the water cycle. If there's one thing I've learned, the kids learn this in like 1st grade, and they can tell you evaporation, precipitation, condensation like that. And then if I ask them kind of to explain it, that's where we kind of get lost. But they know those words, and they can tell you what the water cycle is. So just because I wanted to try to get to a number of 6 or 7, and I wasn't sure how to do it, I thought about it, and I thought, well, maybe it'd be interesting to take a step out. What if this step of the water cycle didn't exist? Because you really have to understand the water cycle. If something was missing, how it would affect the rest of the water cycle in the atmosphere. So that's what I, again, show a diagram of the water cycle. What if condensation suddenly no longer occurred? How would this affect the Earth? So now they're going to have to think, well, if there's no condensation, there's not going to end up being precipitation, there's not going to be rain, what could happen to the plants? No plants and the animals don't eat. So they would just have to go through this whole mental process of removing that step. So they couldn't do this if they really didn't understand what the water cycle was. Not what the words are, because they know it, and they know it just like that, but they're going to have to understand it. I guess that's what it's about. Instead of being able to recite information, it's about getting to really understanding that information and being able to mentally manipulate it in their minds. And then the last one, 4 types of precipitation, comparing and contrasting. You can bubble maps, Venn diagrams, all kinds of ways that they could make that. But they also can tell you the 4 types of precipitation like that, and that's very easy. But instead, where do the ones that freeze, do they freeze in the air or freeze on the ground? Because that's where this distinguishing parts of them are. So really, that is what I did with this worksheet. There's actually less questions, and I think the students, we at Miss Vaughn had this talk, the students like seeing less questions because they think they're working less. But if you ask them 3 really good questions and they think they're working less, they might get more of that than asking 20 questions that are just fill in the blank or multiple choice. So what I was hoping is that you guys would bring a worksheet for your content area, and that you could take 5 or 10 minutes and use these same question stems, and really just create something you could use like this week in class or next week in class. By doing this, coming up with maybe less questions but more higher level thinking questions.
And guys, I'll tell you, the reason that this is so important to me is, I mean, if you take a look at, excuse me for standing in front of you, I'm sorry. If you take a look at number 6 here and then this last one here, what are the 4 types of precipitation? I mean, that is just straight. That's just straight regurgitation. That's just a list. And this is 7th grade. This is a 7th grade worksheet. When have we learned the 4 types of precipitation? I mean, that's not 3rd or 4th grade material. What is it? And the fact that we see that in a 7th grade material, 7th grade resource, that's alarming and concerning. We have to change the level of rigor to make it more important. And comparing and contrasting, and just that simple step, just that simple process. Just write that out and write in it itself. Just write in it. Compare and contrast 4 types of precipitation. And that's it, that's done. It's that simple. That simple sentence change. They give you the topics. I mean, if you want to keep those topics, keep those topics. They give the topics. We just make that change. Now, and here's something that I'll stress too, and I'll put this on you. We're protecting planning periods on Mondays, and we're sticking to that. If we know what worksheets we're going to use Monday through Thursday, or if we have an idea how that's going to go, bring those worksheets. Bring those worksheets then to get an idea on how to bounce that around. And don't just stick in your content area. Your language arts teachers, the great thing about this is we got language arts teachers teaching multiple subjects. They can help you with that. They can help you with that rigor. And this is for all subjects, across the board. Across the board. Okay? Who brought a worksheet? Who did not bring a worksheet? Okay, great. We got a worksheet. Let's work good for the next 5 or 6 minutes. I'm going to walk around. I want to see just to make sure we have a good idea. And I'm going to put this back on now. Language arts teachers who have some experience doing this, please be a resource to your other teachers here. Please be a resource to your other teachers here as well.